Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to the Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today, Wade Swikle. Wade is the founder and CEO of Two College Brothers Moving. It's a storage and franchising business. He's also the host of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast and co-founder of Moving Titan Retreats. Not everybody runs retreats, so we'll have to get into that, or a podcast. Anyway, just wanted to welcome you to the show, Wade.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, Wade, we always try to start with just some context. Where did you grow up? What was your family like? Tell us about your early days.
Yeah, so both my parents were in education. They were teachers, guidance counselors. I grew up in Venice, Florida. I was born and raised here in Florida, and a lot of people can't say that. There are a lot of transplants in this state.
True.
But my parents were always really interested in real estate. My mom's currently a realtor. They've both had a lot of investment properties throughout the years, and I always like to say that they were joggers. So like we kind of grew up doing these 5Ks and 10K races, and they would go jogging in all these different neighborhoods, and they would always see these houses for sale. They'd jog past like the same houses, and they'd see one that was for sale that they'd had their eye on for a long time. And so we spent a lot of Saturdays and Sundays touring open houses for fun, I guess. That was their version of a fun Sunday family activity. And they made offers on several of them, and we moved a lot as kids in the same city or town, I should say. Venice isn't really much of a city, but it's a town. It was a nice community. And so we moved several times from my early childhood all the way through graduating high school, and even while I was in college, they kept doing their thing. So I saw a lot of different moving companies come and go. I helped on a lot of different moves, and I hated every minute of it.
Don't we all?
Yeah, I didn't like how we had to keep moving, but that's just what they wanted to do, and they were the parents, so just had to do it. So they always joked and said, wouldn't it be funny if one day Wade owns a moving company? And here I am.
Here I am. I love that. We were talking before we started recording about how sometimes, your stories from your youth have a string that sometimes people don't connect the dots, even those seeds that get planted. And sometimes we have fun maybe helping them connect those dots. But with yours, you've already connected those dots pretty easily. Okay, so, but you didn't just, start a moving company right out of high school or anything, right? You go off to college. This all came later. So what happens after where you go to college and all that? Tell us about those years.
Yeah, so I was a big baseball player. I played baseball my freshman year of college at a small D2 school in North Carolina. I came back home for the summer and needed to find a job. I was going to be transferring up to Gainesville to go to the University of Florida, just because the whole baseball thing, it was about that time to hang up my cleats. So I decided to go get the big school experience, and I needed to get a job. So it was during the 2008-2009 recession era. And in the summertime, that's a really slow time of the year for like a kind of a touristy beach town in Florida. Most people come in the winter. And so there weren't a lot of businesses that were hiring. It was really tough to find a job. And my dad had a contact that said that I could go work at the mall in some back room folding clothes. And that sounded miserable. That sounded like a miserable way to spend my summer. So I decided to try to find something on my own and take things into my own hands and started posting ads on Craigslist that I was just a young college athlete looking for any kind of general labor. And I did some work, doing all kinds of odd jobs, mowing lawns, helping out handymen, and just doing, being a helping hand in different trades. And I started to get a lot of calls to help people load and unload U-Haul trucks. And I actually kind of enjoyed that work. It was a good physical workout. I usually, I got to see new job sites every day, meet people. They usually fed me lunch and tipped me at the end. So I did that pretty much all summer and saved up a few $1,000, and then made my way off to Gainesville and continued to work some odd jobs, but I would always kind of go back to the Craigslist thing and posting ads to help people load and unload rental trucks, and just to kind of supplement my spending money. And I kind of got the wheels turning and thought, maybe I could bring some of my friends out to help me with this. Maybe we could, work together. We'd usually just split the money at the end of the day. And when I graduated with my undergrad, I did it in telecommunications and broadcast journalism. And I realized I didn't really want to go into that field. One of the professors said, if you want to make $19,000 a year for the first 5 years of your career and go live in the middle of nowhere and work 14-hour days, then this is the job for you.
It sounds like minor league baseball.
Exactly.
These are your two things. Yeah.
Exactly. It was very competitive, and so you can you can get away. Most small town markets, they don't pay a lot. So, but it's a stepping stone to try to get up to the big show, because obviously it's like professional baseball. If you make it on NBC nightly news, you can be making some big dollars and be a little bit of a celebrity. So but I decided that wasn't really for me. So I did what any college student that's having too much fun in college would do, and I applied to grad school. And I applied I was always interested in business. I had a lot of friends whose parents had owned businesses growing up, and they all seemed to be the more well-to-do families. And so I applied for an entrepreneurship program with the University of Florida Warrington College of Business, got in, and part of that program was to start a business. So I played with a few different options, and ultimately ended up going back to this student moving concept idea. And that's what I decided to pursue. So most of the kids in my class were trying to start apps or some kind of technology startup. And I was the only one in the class who wanted to do a home services trade. So they all kind of thought I was crazy, but I think 11 years later, I'm the only one from that class that's still doing what they were starting back then. So, yeah, I just, graduated from that, decided to pursue it. Two College Brothers was actually the name of our biggest local competitor. My original company was called Smarter Moving Solutions. And they called me one day shortly after I graduated, and they were trying to move on and do some other stuff, and offered to sell the business, and ended up buying the company from them and the brand, and decided to use their brand because I felt like it was a more franchisable model. They had been around a little bit longer, so they had a little bit more leads coming in, and just went full on behind the Two College Brothers brand. My brother worked for me at the time, so it kind of made sense. And just grew that up in Gainesville for about 10 years.
Okay. Let me get this timeline straight. Sorry to interrupt, but so all right, you started. How far into the business were you with your name and starting that before Two College Brothers came along?
I was just over a year in with
Okay, so it wasn't too far.
No.
And this thing comes up for sale.
Yeah.
And how did that go about? I mean, did you kind of approach them, or did you just see it posted, or how'd that happen?
No, yeah, they'd been in business for about 3 years, so I'd followed them really closely. I kept one of their flyers on my desk as motivation, and they had opened up like 2 other locations across the state of Florida. And so I was sitting in a meeting with my right-hand guy, and we were talking about, how can we open up more locations like they are? And my phone just rang, and I didn't, recognize the number, but I picked up, and it was one of the brothers. And he said that, they were looking to move on and do other stuff, and they wanted to sell the business. So we had a couple meetings, and I made them an offer for like a third of what they were asking. It was pretty much all I could afford. And they eventually ended up accepting that. And I realized that their other 2 locations were kind of just like shadow locations. They didn't really have any infrastructure over there. They had like some student ambassadors that were just recruiting their friends to go pick up small jobs. So we closed those down and just focused on the Gainesville branch. And just spent the next couple of years just fine tuning that and growing that as much as I could. And I opened a second location down in Tampa in 2015. Which was probably a little premature, because for the next 3 years it was a struggle trying to get that off the ground and then still manage the Gainesville location.
It's hard, right? That expansion.
Yeah. And I had bootstrapped pretty much the entire operation in Gainesville.
Yeah. Okay. Let me back up. I'm fascinated by this acquisition so early. Okay. Was it an earn out, or did you have to borrow some money? Just curious.
Yeah, so my older brother lent me the money that I needed on a 3-year note.
Okay.
And I made a bunch of calls to everybody. That was one thing I learned in my entrepreneurship class, is like the money's always there. You just have to find it. If you
Yeah.
want to raise money, you can do it. People will invest in somebody who's ambitious, that has a game plan that they
Right.
see an opportunity in. And I just happened to be lucky enough that my source was closer to me. He was my older half brother. He had an established career in corporate America for a couple decades at that point. So yeah, he said, I just want to see you succeed. Here you go. Pay me back in 3 years and we'll be good. So did that. And that's pretty much how the merger, so to speak, came
Yeah.
to
Well,
be.
it's a kind of a neat success story. I think I hear more horror stories about the family loan for the small
Yeah.
business than. So this is really a kind of a cool. And what's so neat about this is since I kind of know the story, there's some building blocks here, folks, that are building. You're going to kind of see how this all really logically fits together. As a kid, you're moving around, then you start this business, the entrepreneurship program. I usually think of those things as like, hey, well, make up a business. You don't actually have to do the business, but just it's more of an exercise than a
Yeah.
reality. So I think it's pretty cool that your project, so many people complain that maybe what they study in school or even in graduate school doesn't perfectly apply to what they end up doing. I think it's kind of cool how that all really applies. You really use that and kept consistent with that.
Yeah.
So
And that's exactly kind of what it actually was. I mean, it was more of like an exercise.
okay.
And I didn't realize that. I just knew going into that
You said, hey,
program
let's
that,
do it for real. It works on paper.
yeah,
Let's do it for real. I need a job
yeah,
anyway.
exactly. I think I started it like a week before I actually started classes. So I just took it upon
Right.
myself, trying to get ahead.
Right.
Um,
Right. And then you
and
walk in class and like, no, you didn't actually have to start the. What do you mean? I already started it.
yeah, exactly. That's
Okay.
pretty much how it was,
Yeah.
exactly how it went. So, but it was good. I had a lot of
Yeah.
mentorship from the professors. I definitely learned more uh, in a year on my own than I
Yeah.
did in school.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
it laid some good foundations, and it gave me an excuse to still be kind of a student for a while. I mean, while I was
Right.
doing that, I was kind of halfway running. I was running the business, but I wasn't 100% in it. I was still being a student, and it was just a way for me to support myself and pay my way through that master's program. So
Yeah.
and then I went full steam ahead once
Yeah.
I graduated and had the free time to do so.
Well, okay. And then I think where we left the story was opening Tampa and what a struggle that is. I think, one of the things we try to do on this podcast is, nobody wants to hear the up and to the right because it's not realistic. We always have setbacks and stuff. So I like that you really were honest about that second location is hard. I mean, even if you have the
Yeah.
model down in one place, you're like, well, this is simple. Let's just replicate it and just do it other places. And I know it's been like that for us. Like sometimes it's harder to open the second and third, and they're not as connected to the vine, and you expect them to know the things that you sort of intuitively know, and you got to get training up and running and all that. So, can you kind of unpack that experience a little more?
Yeah, it was really tough. Like I had said, I had pretty much bootstrapped our Gainesville office.
Yeah.
In the Tampa office, I thought I could pretty much do the same thing, but it turned out to be a lot harder than
Mm.
it was in Gainesville. There's a lot more competition. It's just geographically a much larger space. It
Mm.
wasn't as like tight knit of a community like Gainesville was, and I thought I knew what I was doing until I got into a bigger pond. And the stuff that was working for me in Gainesville wasn't working. Tampa. The
Wow.
labor pool was completely different.
Wow.
I had all these connections from going to school up there that I didn't have down in
That's
Tampa.
true.
So yeah, so it was tough. It took 3 or 4 years before Tampa started to do anything, and I was just too stubborn to close it. I kept, I at that point rather ran myself ragged than try to concede to the
Right. You're not going to
the
concede the
universe.
loss. Yes.
Yeah, but in COVID, during COVID, we moved our whole headquarters down to Tampa. I went to a mastermind retreat that was just kind of informally organized by some other moving company owners in late 2019. And the big takeaway that I had was that I needed to be in a bigger pond. I needed to have my
Mm.
focus in a bigger market where there was just more potential, more opportunities, get closer to the action. So we moved our headquarters down. We kept the office in Gainesville. I still went back and forth a lot, but we got a big warehouse here in Tampa like 6 months later after that 2019 retreat, right in the middle of COVID. I
Wow.
think we got a pretty good deal on it because a lot of businesses kind of froze up during that period, and we were maybe dumb enough to invest in more infrastructure. But it actually ended up working out really well because the housing market caught on fire. And I didn't know what was going to happen at the beginning of COVID. I was kind of scared. I thought, we might lose it all. And it ended up being one of the biggest, booms in our industry because the housing market just heated up so much. Interest rates dropped to like unspeakable lows.
Right.
And, things just really took off and gave us a lot of momentum. And now we started franchising the concept within about the last year, and we sold our Gainesville location as a franchise. So that's now independently owned and operated. And we're looking to sell more franchise territories. I've essentially spent the last 11 and a half years, making every mistake so that prospective franchisee doesn't have to, and just reverse engineering the moving business. I host the podcast where I interview other successful moving company owners, find out what works from them, pull all these different nuggets. And I've got the Moving Titan Retreats, which is just, it's basically an event planning, retreat planning business that kind of parlays off of that very first informal gathering that we had where we made the decision to bring everything to Tampa. And that's another big mastermind thing that we do and just learn from all kinds of cool people. And both of those events give me access to a lot of really high performing people that are motivating, but also I can learn from and connect with all around the country and even Canada. So it's all just kind of like part of this moving ecosystem that has allowed us to create really dialed in systems and processes, like learn exactly, the best practices in this business, hear what new things are on the horizon in the business, what pitfalls to avoid, how, leveraging vendor relationships. And that's why I finally decided to franchise, was because I felt like we've got a really good bundle here. It's a business in a box, basically. We have the recipe, we have all the systems, processes, training videos, marketing templates. We've got, the connections with the vendors and the suppliers, and we know what marketing works. We have companies all in every corner of the country that are kind of part of like that mentorship advisory board. And so now here we are. Now I'm trying to figure out a whole new business in the franchising space, which it is very different from our core business.
This is fascinating. I mean, you mentioned some of the services that you've kind of figured out. But I'm just, from a business nerd, you will get a bunch of business owners to listen to this, so I don't think I'm alone. And I'm just kind of, I don't know anything about the moving business, I admit, other than I don't like doing it myself. My daughter is going to grad school in Europe, and I was joking with my friends. It's not really a joke that I flew 5,000 miles to put together IKEA furniture and move her apartment. I'm like, that was just not the best vacation. Love seeing her, of course, but from a sightseeing, the IKEA was not the most exciting sightseeing activity. So I even told her when we both agreed, I'm not doing that again. We're not moving you again. Like, well, I'll hire somebody to move you. But what are the 2 or 3 things that the small kind of maybe mom and pop moving company, what are the biggest struggles you think they have? If you had to name 2 or 3 key things, just curious.
Yeah, I think most moving company owners, they're not necessarily business people. They fall into the moving industry. It's it's not really something that a kid grows up and dreams to be one day, unless their family, unless they're like second or third generation, maybe. But I think most people end up taking a job like moving because it's the only job available to them, similar to how I kind of fell into the industry. And then they realize that the owner is making all this money, which a lot of times they're actually not, but they think they are. And they try to, think they can do it better. And so you have a lot of people that don't really have that business mindset, that don't really understand what it takes to be an entrepreneur, that don't have the people skills. So a lot of mom and pop companies stay very small because they just don't understand delegation. They don't understand numbers, how to read profit and loss statements, how to do cash flow projections. You can go down a rabbit hole with that. They don't understand the KPIs that they need to know to have a healthy business. And then they don't maybe have the people skills to lead a team under them and then to relate to their ideal clientele. So I see that a lot in our industry. It is very fragmented. It's a very fragmented space.
Yeah.
I've had a few people in the private equity space reaching out because they want to get involved since it is so fragmented and try to roll up, some of the industry.
Yeah, makes sense.
And it's predominantly dominated by an older generation that's getting ready to retire. You've got all these van lines and you've got this very antiquated way of doing business and moving. And just within the last few years, we're starting to see a lot of technology come into it. We've got really cool CRMs that are popping up, that are competing with one another, that are getting venture capital money. We've got softwares that are using artificial intelligence for estimating. We've got, GPS dual facing dash cams on the truck so that we can reduce some of our liability. There's a lot more of that than existed before. All of our guys, they have tablets, so all the paperwork's on the tablet. The customer has their own portal so they can see the inventory before the move, the quote, everything outlined, so that when they sign the paperwork on moving day, they're not just like trying to read through all this mumbo jumbo. So a lot of things are changing. Most of the companies I talked to at our retreat and on my podcast started after 2008. Because there was a big opening in the industry. Everything was yellow pages before, moving companies. That's how you started a moving company. You opened up a yellow page ad. Now everything's online. Yellow pages aren't really a thing. You've got Google reviews. You've got a million different things online that you can use. Social media, just search engine optimization. So that alone has attracted a more tech savvy generation. And then you didn't have to worry about Google reviews before that. You now have to worry about people making a whole YouTube video if you suck
right
these days. So there's a lot more accountability digitally there. But also we saw the largest moving company, I believe in the world, at least the United States, Grable, go out of business in the last recession.
Wow.
A lot of those van lines that have been around for over 100 years are struggling. Their average driver is like 55 or 60 years old, and they're having a really hard time recruiting drivers into that way of life that live on the road. And that model is just, it's not working very well right now until they figure out a better way, because a 25-year-old eligible driver can go drive a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van that has air conditioning and all the bells and whistles, and move a 3-pound box to somebody's door and make $26 an hour to do that, versus making less than that to drive a big rig to from Arkansas to New York. And it's hard to get and the 25-year-old driving the working for Amazon can be home by dinner time. So the labor issue is definitely been a big point of concern for a lot of moving companies over the last few years. And
what's your solve for that? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is the technology and just the culture that we're able to build. Being a younger, more energetic, more ambitious company, we've got a really fun culture here at Two College Brothers. Like we just have fun, and that's missing from a lot of the older companies, the Hard Knocks, School of Hard Knocks guys that are just blue collar and rough around the edges.
Right. So you create a culture that people want to work in, and I think. Now we're kind of, and this is the reason I, really wanted to have you on, Wade, is, since this is the Generous Business Owner podcast, one of the things, number one, I love that about the culture you're trying to build to attract people, because frankly, that's a generous move to build a culture where people want to come to work. Frankly, that's generosity to your employees. Of course, it's good for the bottom line, but it's not one or the other. Building that. So we've had people on like Mark McLean that are, runs a big software company that's just obsessed with building a good culture, mostly just out of respect for his people. But it also is good business for retention and that sort of thing. We had another guy on, Henry Kastner, who runs a series of private equity firms that invest in entrepreneurs who want to treat their people well and preach the gospel and do all kinds of things that are positive for the world. And what happened is he realized, for every 100 deals he sees, he does one. But he started, faith-driven investor, faith-driven entrepreneur, so that he could serve more people. And I kind of think you sort of fit into that. Of course, you want franchisees, but clearly not all of your listeners or people that come to your retreats. You're really, I feel like you're giving away kind of the keys to running a good business. And hey, folks, if you're running your own business and you want to do that, Godspeed. But if you'd like to do it with us, it seems like more fun and easier. Do it. So maybe could you speak to that philosophy, just how you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. It's just a mentality of abundance. I didn't
Yes,
know,
I like that word.
I didn't know where the podcast was going to take me when I was starting it back in like 2017. I just thought it could open up doors, and some people would have probably been, shy to give away a bunch of information on a podcast, and those weren't my guests. I found people that shared that same mentality and aligned with that, and same thing with the retreats. Like there's competitors in my market that we are pretty transparent with each other. Like
Right.
it's good to network with what could be a competitor, because then you can work together to rule out the rogue players in the industry.
Right.
You increase the overall consumer trust in your industry so that they're not hesitant to hire you and pay the prices that a business owner deserves. And so that you can afford to pay your guys more and offer them benefits and offer fun, perks for them and do cool stuff in the office. So, it's that mindset of just being open to helping other people. I like to spend my time with 30% of people above me, 30% of people on my level that we can push and hold each other accountable, and then 30% of people that I can help below me, because you never know, when they're going to be able to help you again in the future. And then 10% to yourself. It's important to reflect and keep a clear head and meditate and enjoy your personal life, because after all, like, that's why are we all in business? It's to have a better life for ourselves and our families. So you need
Well, I
to
love that
dedicate
30,
some time
30, 30, 10, kind of that is an abundant mentality. I'm just thinking a lot of people think of just even in giving of money, like, okay, I give 10, but I keep 90. What you're basically saying is I'm sort of you're doing time, but I'm keeping 10 for my own sort of mental health. Is almost like a Sabbath kind of thing that we would say, but 30 above, 30 at the same level, and 30 below. I really like that kind of model. And that's super cool. I love the way you're thinking about that. So how is that franchising business going now? Where what's the size of it? How you doing?
Yeah, so I'm learning something new with it every day. We just recently started doing it, and so I've only sold the one location so far. I am trying to, obviously grow it. We're trying to do it the right way, though. I don't want to be one of these companies that sells 100 franchises in the first year and then loses complete control of this animal. We're focused more on regionally selling it across the Southeast, Florida especially, because we can basically build up, that regional brand recognition that way. I can get in a car and drive to somebody, or they can drive to me if they need some help, or I want to go help them. It allows us to work with the same suppliers so that we can get more purchasing power there, more marketing power, more marketing leverage, and just have a closer community that can get together a little bit more franchisees. So I'm really in no rush to grow the franchise. I want the right people to come my way. And part of the reason I do these podcasts and try to help so many people is I just want, I want to be that magnetic person that draws the right person that aligns with my values to come my way, because that's one of the biggest things I've learned so far in franchising is that, it all comes down to who the franchisees are. And
Right.
just because they have the money doesn't mean it's
Right.
somebody that I think is going to fit. So I'm going to trade shows. I'll be going to a couple this fall. Went to a couple last spring. And definitely getting the word out and trying to spread our reach, but at the same time, just want to be very selective. I've got a good thing going with the core business here locally. We've got a great franchisee up in Gainesville that's taking it to another level. I've got several other businesses that I'm a member of, including Titan Retreats. So that's I'm not in any rush. It'll all come my way if I just do the right things.
Yeah. No, I love these terms that you're using, like values alignment. We talk to a lot of young professionals and young entrepreneurs, and they're like, well, what's your practical tip for them? And I'm always like, find some place that's values aligned, right? So it's not just about the X's and O's, but whatever industry you're in, find your people,
Yeah.
And then this word transparency with each other. I just love that. And then this abundance mentality. I do not think those things are commonly used, but I think they're critical to kind of building this sort of thing. We have a lot of kind of older entrepreneurs that have sort of been there and done that and have all these war stories. So it's kind of fun to have you kind of earlier than our typical guest, just fighting those battles and learning those lessons, but having that mentality. We know where that leads, because those kind of phrases you're using of abundance and transparency and that those are the tips those older people get. But for maybe your peers or somebody a little bit behind you on the on the journey, you know, we always like to wrap the podcast with just a practical tip. So it might be something you already said or something else that pops into your mind, but what would be something you just leave with folks?
Yeah, so there's two things. One that I wish I had not waited 5 or 6 years to do is to seek out mentors and find people that are doing in my industry that I want what I wanted to do. And as soon as I started doing that, 2017, 2018, everything started to click. I had a roadmap. You know, I was reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts. Like I was hungry. I was desperate for this information, but it wasn't until I was able to connect with somebody who was doing exactly what I wanted to do is when it started to make sense. And through the podcasts and the retreats, I've been able to do a lot of that. And then the second thing is just learning how to look at your numbers, like how to look at the KPIs. I thought when I was starting off that stuff wasn't really that important, even though I'd taken the finance and the accounting courses in college. I just did enough to get by on that. And I didn't, I was like, yeah, well, I'll just, outmarket, outsell, and all the cash will come in, and I'll just, figure that out later. I'll hire somebody to manage the books. But it really is important to have a thumb pulse on your business with the numbers and knowing what your KPIs need to be. And I didn't even know what that phrase was or where they needed to be until I found the mentorship that said, okay, your labor percentage has to be here, your cost of goods sold have to be here, your net profit should be here. Before I was just like, how much money is in my bank account? Can we afford that? Okay. And then a week later, oh shit, are we going to make payroll? Like that was, kind of the early days. And it took me a while for it to get through my hard head that, those two things were very important.
Well, Wade, I just want to thank you for those are great practical tips. And I just want to thank you for being on the Generous Business Owner podcast this week.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right. And everybody, we do have a new YouTube channel. Check out the Generous Business Owner on YouTube and generousbusinessowner.com and sign up for our newsletter. And please share and leave reviews. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.